Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for spending time, a little bit of your afternoon with us as we talk about the new large group guide for mission evidence of grace. Excited about this. Just really appreciate all of you as we've wrapped up this webinar series. Thank you for engaging us with us around this content. I'm just going to go ahead and dive right in to the content of the large group leader guide. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So one of the things, this is really, just to give you some backstory, this is really one of the pieces that we made slight alterations to it based off of what you all have experienced, or if you have experienced in Mission Grace in Action. The Evidence of Grace large group guide, you're going to see, if you have that previous experience, largely it didn't change that much. There are some tweaks, some different things that did change, and we'll go over and really review those and cover those as we go forward in the webinar. But if you're familiar with the new TNT update, largely you're going to find that not too much necessarily has changed. But let's go ahead and just dive right into this. One of the things that you're going to see, obviously, if you're familiar with Grace in Action, if you use Grace in Action this past year, you're going to see that this page is very much similar in that regard. It matches, all of the background of the particular lessons. You have the section titles inside of them, but also the architecture on this page really didn't change that much. If you're familiar with our large group teaching materials, we have really first and foremost this main idea, the main theme up here, and then a lesson overview. You then include over here memory verse, definitions, and then lesson objectives. Now, a couple of things here just to, I think, maybe clarify this, because we did get some questions about this, that this large group teaching guide, this is a resource designed for a large group teacher. It's designed for whoever is your large group master communicator to use this as they're preparing to teach and engage your kids in your TNT program in the large group section or component of club. And really what we wanted to do primarily with this page, so if you're not familiar with our new TNT materials, is that really encapsulated inside of this one page right here is everything that you really need in order to fully prepare with just the understanding of what the lesson is going to talk about. You have the memory verse, you have the definition, you have the objectives, you have summary, you have the main idea. In some ways, this is the wing it page, in that if you're pulling in hockey stop into the church parking lot, racing from work, getting out, that you have the essential information on just this one page in order to effectively communicate and share the large group teaching components with your kids in your club. But you can see, if you're familiar here, that the architecture, the design of the page really hasn't changed that much from year to year. In the next page, you're going to see that there are some changes now. If you're familiar, last year, one of the things that we wanted to do is just change some of the landscape orientation to some of the pages. If you're familiar, that almost like that upper half of the book was filled with preloaded content, preloaded either intro activity ideas and various components. In this next iteration, we wanted to just shift some things around based off of some feedback that we received from really leaders like yourself who are using this. But let's go ahead and walk through this. Over here where it says underneath 4.2 prayer, and then you'll see planning. And then we include some time considerations. Consider modifying your large group time to best fit your allotted time frame. And here's some suggestions in order to do that. So for some of you, we understand that the amount of time that you allocate to a large group, it's different from club to club to club. Everybody does it to some degree slightly different. So we've created just a structure that, hey, if you have 15 minutes, if you have 20 minutes, if you have 25 minutes, these are just some different, if you're familiar, and if you've already watched our webinar from where we talk about the small group leader guide, these are just some sample schedules or some sample order of operations in order to help you fit these different components of large group inside of that time frame. You'll also notice too, because I think one of the questions that I anticipate us getting is, hey, are you guys doing a resource bundle for this next year of TNT? Absolutely. There's going to be a resource bundle. There's going to be teaching resources that are going to be downloadable. There's going to be PowerPoint slide decks for every single lesson, as well as a few other resources that will also load into there as well. And I'll speak more about that towards the end of our webinar. But here you'll see that for here prayer activities with instructions available on the resource bundle. The resource bundle site, you can get to it by going to awana.org/TT resource bundle. If you go to that link right now, you're only going to find information that relates and resources that only relate to Grace in Action. We are currently in the process of building out the additional resources for year 2. Those right now, our deadline, our time frame is to have those go live July 1, when it is our on-shelf date for the rest of this, for the rest of the resources and material here. So if you're not familiar with that, I encourage you to go ahead and check it out. We are going to be making some adjustments to it, just some user interface type improvements, just really across the board, really giving it a nice upgrade there for ease of use and with simplicity as our goal. So in the planning of how you want to do your large group time, we also throw in there some of these options, 2 options for the introductory activity, and then 2 options for the main lesson, just for you to have as a large group leader, just because we know that all of your kids are different, all of your groups are different, just different options for you to be able to use as a large group teacher. And I think one of the things that was really helpful is I traveled coast to coast and kind of got to hear how the large group, leader guide was being used, that a lot of people found a lot of value, a lot of use out of those different options. It really made the difference inside of how they use the large group guide and the resource. But you'll see over here as we move to the other side of the page, underneath where it says large group lesson introduction right here. Let me explain one of the things that we're trying to do. If you're not familiar with the Mission Grace in Action curriculum, over here, this introduction, we want you to kickstart your large group time by referencing or playing off of the intro activity, the Start Here activity that you find inside of the kids' handbook. Now, one of the things that we did just to kind of help you reference this is we included thumbnails of, through the different sections and components of large group time. We included a thumbnail from the kids' handbook simply because we can't always necessarily make the assumption that whoever the large group teacher is that night is somebody who's an active leader with the rest of these kids. So if you want to reference something, and in this case the Start Here section of this particular lesson, this just gives you some visual orientation so that you can just be on the same page with the rest of your kids. But in this case, right here for the intro activity, it says that your TNT kids were asked to have a one-way conversation with someone, not allowing them to speak. And then we just give you some ideas of how you can launch into this as the introduction. If you come with kids who are already prepared, great. You can just start and really hit the ground running with your presentation for these kids. If you come with kids who aren't prepared, maybe this is a great way for them to complete this particular section during a club night. Shouldn't take them necessarily that long. And then you might want to throw out maybe 1 or 2 questions, really just to get your time going. And then after the kids answer, we have some concepts for you to share to just really, really get your intro. Sometimes the hardest part of large group teaching with a group of kids is just, how do I get this thing started? How do I get everybody focused into the conversation and really engaged? Because oftentimes we'll throw out either a mixer or something, like in another church that we visited to, they did a mixer, and that was great, but the mixer only involved the kids that were on the stage. And the kids that were sitting in the chairs, they weren't necessarily that interested in what was going on the stage, because it didn't necessarily involve them other than to cheer for the people who are on the stage. Doing large group like this gives every kid a stakehold into what we're talking about that night, because again, you're going to be referencing things from their unique perspective, and it's all centered around a unified experience, so that nobody necessarily gets left out of the conversation or left out of the experience. You'll see over here that we did include some white space, so your introduction notes, maybe you want to reference maybe a personal story, maybe you have that one-way conversation that you want to reference. We just give you some space here on the side, really just to jot down your ideas and to include your notes about how you would do that, just so that you have it there as you're teaching. And imagine having this book laid out before you. These are just components that you'll be able to see while you're doing a large group teaching. I skipped ahead a little bit, but I just want to kind of go back over here because I skipped over this. But part of what we want to do is just really give you some space to think through what your plan is going to be. Now, we understand that for some of you, your plan doesn't necessarily change that much from week to week. However, we do know that for some of you, you do share space with a lot of other ministries. So we threw in there just some blank space for you to think through and really write down a plan of like, what are your space considerations? You know, some of you, again, this doesn't change. You have the same space every week and none of it ever changes. For some of you, it changes all the time. One of the reasons why we include space considerations in here is because I guess I want to inject maybe a little bit of a different thought for our large group leaders out there, and that the environment in which you are giving your talk or your presentation or sharing your lesson, the environment in which this takes place is important to consider. Because even, for instance, and again, I know that all of you have your various limitations that you're working through. But how can the environment, the place where you're actually talking about this, or even the sounds, the smells, everything that's a part of the experience that your kids are actively living in, how is that influencing the things that you're saying? One of the examples I give of this is one time I was giving a large group talk to my TNT boys, and we had a very incredibly noisy classroom on the other side, and oftentimes it felt like me as a large group teacher, I had to fight against the noise in order to just get my boys to pay attention. So some of the space considerations might be, hey, maybe I need to go talk to my director and just say, hey, is there a possibility that maybe we could switch rooms? Can we do something? Can we work something out? Primarily because you don't want some of these things like, do I have enough chairs? Is the size of my room too small? Because I've also been in that situation where literally so many boys were packed into such a small environment that it just made it really difficult and really uncomfortable to hear some of these messages. Also things like, do I need a whiteboard? If I need a whiteboard, do I need do I need a chalkboard? Do I need a whiteboard? Do I need something? Do I need a projector? What am I going to be displaying my information on? And then we include some lesson considerations there at the bottom, like, do I need audio visual equipment? How many do I need printouts of the resource bundle? Any props or supplies? Volunteers? Do I need to download PowerPoint from the resource bundle? Like, these are just different things that you can use to your advantage to help craft your plan for doing large group from week to week. All right. Then we move on to the next spread of the large group teaching guide. You'll see again, we changed up the landscape orientation, but largely all the components stayed the same. You'll see that, like before, we went very horizontal with some of this white space here in your teaching outline notes, lesson application notes. Here we're going vertical, and largely this is all off of feedback that we received from users like yourself. But here, the idea behind this is that you could lay this spread down on a music stand and be able to teach everything from the large group lesson, obviously aside from the intro, but you would have everything for the bulk of your large group lesson on one spread. You have the teaching outline. This teaching outline is going to be included in the form of also a PowerPoint slide deck so that it will match, slide for slide. One of the things that we are doing though is because our slide decks in the TNT resource bundle, they were pretty extensive. We included actually a lot of scripture verbatim on there. And we actually heard back from viewers like yourself that you actually wanted a more clean, a more simple, a fewer count slide deck. So we're actually going to be making an 8, possibly a 7, but probably 7 to 8 slide count slide deck for you to use. And part of what's going to be included in there is the teaching outline. So that would be preloaded and everything for you, good to go. But you have, in this case, simple teaching outline. What is prayer? Does the Bible have examples of prayer? Does God always answer prayer? And then some space for you, again, to craft out some of your teaching outlines or notes, or maybe you want to make one of our questions into a point. You might want to change something that we put in there. You have freedom to do that. And again, we're including for orientation for you just some places to pull from inside of the kids handbook. Maybe if you want a different example or if you want to reference something specific that was used inside of the kids handbook. We have memory verse, and then on the other side here, moving on into lesson application. And then with just some questions for you to possibly prime their thinking with, because if you follow it, if you follow the format going from game time to large group to small group, these might be some things that you want to pepper in there just to even prep their small group time. But then again, that would depend on how you structure your group and if you follow that format. Then if it's hard to start it, it's hard to get off the stage. and in some cases, one of the things that, because I've also experienced from some large group teachers, just they have a really difficult time wrapping up the lesson. Maybe they just get, I've had my head just go straight into a point for way too long. Sometimes I've even retold the same story about 4 or 5 times to when I know that the kids are losing me. And I just, early on in my ministry, I just didn't know how to get off the stage. We wanted to include a sum it up section just for you as a large group teacher, just to be able to know, like, hey, how do I get off the stage? How do we end this? And so we also include just some points and some principles for you to recap some of these key concepts and really just land the plane. As a large group teacher, it's not a good idea because, again, really we're talking about 15 minutes, ideally with our kids in large group time. If you're pushing 25, I would say it better be an amazing story. That's really captivating your kids. But like that 15, 20-minute mark, I think that's maximum what you're shooting for. But oftentimes as large group leaders, we can just start circling the airport. We can just start going around in circles, and you see it in your kids' eyes. And if you're experienced enough, you know that when you're losing them. So really just having some of these, like, drop the microphone, sum it up moments just helps you make a good transition from that last point from the lesson application to landing the plane, so that way they can get on with their night. As large group teachers, I imagine that most of you just have a natural bent to want to share out of your passion and your stories and your heart, and there's just so much, and you feel like 15 minutes is just too short of a time, or even 25 minutes is too short of a time. However, I think when it comes to our TNT kids, we need to understand that less is more. In this particular regard, we want to communicate concisely. We want to communicate to the point, but we also don't want to belabor it or take them down, paths or inject stories that are going to cause confusion if it's going to cause them to be disinterested. So craft that's just a little bit of some of the theory behind how we've crafted this particular page. And then you also see that we include a lot of notes for you, or a lot of space for you to include additional lesson application notes that you want to include in your large group time. And then the last page underneath this section is that we have a space for you, and this is very similar. I believe hardly anything has changed from Grace in Action to this, but we include a lot of space for you to do to just jot down some announcements. And then based on if you do prayer in your small groups, or if you give an opportunity to do some corporate prayer, or maybe you hear about things throughout the week. I know some large group teachers, they actually collect some requests from their kids, and they actually pray about them corporately with the rest of the group, which is really interesting to do, just because it helps to take prayer as an additional level outside of small group. So we just want to include some space in here for you all to be able to do that. But this totally wraps up and concludes everything that's inside of the large group teaching guide. As you can see, if you're familiar with our Grace in Action material, is very similar, with some minor tweaks here and there based on some formatting and some where we place some of the sections and some of the modules. But other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to questions if we have any. So Missy, questions?
Yes, sir. There are a couple out there, and we're gonna stall a little bit for time by asking a few that I know we have curated through our TNT email address that might be to the benefit of some of the other leaders. But we've got a viewer out here right now, a leader. Her name is Pam, and she's wondering. Again, you talked about this in the beginning of the presentation about the resource bundle and what's included. Her question is specific to the presentation slide deck. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we would expect to find in the resource bundle for this second year of TNT, and talk about how you customize the slide deck? Is it available in a shorter or longer version? If you could expound on those resources available, this special bonus material, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I think so. For the PowerPoint slide deck, we're really giving you 8 slides. You're going to have a title slide. You're going to have slides for each one of your teaching points. You're going to have a slide for the memory verse. You're going to have a customizable slide, a slide for the sum it up, and I believe a slide for the main point. So, but really inside of that, that's really all that we're going to give you. If you're familiar with what it was before, and you can go on awana.org/TT resource bundle in order to check it out. Now you'll see that we actually included the scripture with it. That made our slide decks incredibly long. So one of the things that we wanted to do is just really give you something that, one, was easy to download, but then on top of that, just have everything really concisely fit together so that, I mean, if you're going through 40 slides in a presentation, that's a lot of slides to be able to go through, simply because we included a lot of scripture with that. So we're actually just going to include the with the teaching points, a parenthetical notation to what passage that we're talking about. And then if you want to include the actual scripture in there, you have the freedom to do that, because we'll include a customizable slide so that you can really put in you could drop video into it, you could drop additional scripture into it, really whatever you need that to be able to do. In terms of the resource bundle as a whole, we include the teaching resources from those two options for the intro activity and 2 options for the teaching component of large group. You can download those. Those are a PDF. That's something that you get with the resource bundle. You get the PowerPoint slides. Another thing that's also included there is we're going to be putting up there some clip art for you to use for, like, either doing any type of promoing, or maybe you want to drop in some clip art on another piece that you're using inside your PowerPoint slide deck. We're also going to be including the special needs verses there. So if you have kids that have, want to use the special needs verse labels, you can download them from that site. And then lastly, we're going to be having one that's familiar. We're going to be posting some audio components similar to last year. So if you want to download some of the spoken word for some of the verses, you can do that. But then something that's new coming out that we just actually started working on last week. If you're familiar with our journey material, you're familiar with the fact that we include the back-end leader training videos, where if you're familiar with them, they show, like in this case with Jeremy Pettit, at the time was our director of youth ministries. He actually leads it through a video format, really giving you really what's the main idea for the night. Then leading you through almost like a quick synopsis, like a 5-minute synopsis of what the large group, time, really the essence of it, so that, you can almost feel like, okay, help me be just in the ballpark of this idea of what I need to be communicating to my kids. And then lastly are just some helpful hints and tips, some facilitation helps, and then also maybe to have a leader-to-leader conversation about some of the small group questions that you're going to be talking about. Those are going to be downloadable videos. They're going to be housed here in the resource bundle. That is a new feature that's going to come out. But that is pretty much a synopsis of everything that's going to appear in the resource bundle.
That's awesome. So it sounds like from your perspective on the children's ministry team, you're trying to provide as many tools to the TNT leaders and commanders out there as possible, and they can pick and choose what works best to not only train the leaders within their club, but also to prepare the best large group teaching time as possible, right?
Sure, absolutely. Because I think what's important there is, because I've been that large group teacher who's just been hanging out in the hallway, and it's been, hey, can you speak to our kids tonight? And I'm like, man, I haven't prepared anything. And I think it's so important to bring up this point, in that if we're communicating to our kids by the seat of our pants, if we're just shooting from the hip in order to do this, that's going to be the experience that our kids get. But as leaders, if we actually take the time to plan and prepare and think through a not only just a well-crafted lesson, but a well-crafted large group communication experience for our kids, I think I think our kids get a better end experience in the end. I think we as leaders feel way more confident about really the information that we're communicating. And in the end, I think everybody wins. That's part of our heart behind this resource, is just providing you with, as leaders, more than you'll need, and just tools so that you feel like you have what you need to communicate well with your TNT boys and girls.
Fantastic. So I think what I hear you saying, Chris, is that the materials that are provided, all of the points that are provided within the large group leader guide for large group teaching don't all have to be used during a large group teaching. That leaders can pick and choose and create their own experience, that the large group leader guide is really just providing them multiple different options.
Yeah, I mean, as a large group teacher, as soon as you have this resource in your hands, I mean, you're in the driver's seat. So, for instance, if you know that you can't get through 3 points in a night, because for me, I love telling stories. Usually, I'm a 1 or 2 point large group communicator, simply because I like telling stories, and I know that those stories are going to eat up a certain amount of time with my boys. So, for instance, if you don't get to point 3, you don't get to point 3. Now, that's really a judgment call, because as the leader of this group, you're in the driver's seat based off of how you're going to use this material with your kids. I mean, and so I would go so much as to say is that, large group teachers, look at the bottom page. We as Awana didn't include a sign off at the bottom of this page to make sure that, you checked the box and communicated everything that you needed to. One of the most important things of a large group teacher is just to be sensitive to the Spirit's leading when you're actually talking and communicating with your kids. Simply because there's going to be, there may be a point where, man, I need to just communicate this one thing, and we need to spend our entire time just focusing on this one aspect with our kids. Other nights, maybe they're just totally they're totally engaged in what you're talking about, and you're going to get through multiple points. I think as a large group teacher, what are you going to communicate? First of all, do you know your audience? What are you going to communicate? And are you going to do it in a way that really gives them time to digest it? Or is it going to be like rapid fire points and so much information that you're going to totally overload their systems? So we've given you a lot of options here, but I think a smart, well-trained, large group teacher understands who they're talking to, that these are 3rd through 6th graders. They just came from 8 hours of school. Some of them might have went from there to a after-school program. It's debatable whether or not they've actually had something to eat prior to coming to club. So they are just antsy by nature. They are, I mean, you only have a certain amount of time to be able to communicate to them based off of really understanding who they are. So I would just encourage you to maybe look through what we have created. We have a set structure in place, but you have freedom and choices to really craft this or modify it to really help reach your kids, to give them the information that they need, that is going to speak into their life, that's going to help form their discipleship. So I would encourage you to really lean into what we've provided here, but know that the end game is not to make sure that you do it all. The end game is to make sure that you communicate well to your kids, that they understand it, that they have an opportunity to absorb it, to digest it. And really, as large group teachers, if you follow the game time, large group time, small group time, you're teeing up the topic that is then going to be unpacked in the form of discussion in small group time. So,
great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Sorry if I seem like I'm on a bit of a delay. We're dealing with technical issues around here in the office, the home office. So Chris, let me know if any of my questions are breaking up as I serve them back to you. But Carol McPherson out here is asking, she really loved enjoying the international videos, which I imagine are the special material provided if you want to host some Go lessons to talk about, serving internationally. Where are they going to be finding those in Mission Evidence of Grace? Are those still included with a large group?
Yep. So the Go lessons are going to be repackaged as a digital download I'm sorry, I should have listed that when I was talking about the other features of the resource bundle, but those Go lessons are going to be available on the resource bundle for you to use inside of your club experience. And again, really putting that resource, using the same metaphor, churches, church leaders, you are in the driver's seat. However you want to deploy and use that resource, you get to pick and choose how to do that. But you will be able to find that inside the resource bundle.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I know we're running short on time, and we want to keep this short and concise for those leaders that are watching later, and be honoring and cognizant of the time restraints that everyone has to watch these. But one more thing, Chris, and perhaps we can use this as an opportunity to wrap up the time here. I know there might be some leaders out there that are struggling not only to train volunteers that are new this year, or they still have questions about, all right, how do I really leverage this new material, and they're just, having a hard time grasping it through the training that's available here online from these webinars or any of the materials available on our website. Where else can leaders go, perhaps even for a personal touch point when it comes to training and to understanding this?
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So just bear with me just so that everybody has it right here in front of you of just where to go. First of all, you can get in touch with us at awanatt.org. You can sign up there for more information. We also have some links on there that are redirects to take you to the spaces where you can engage with us on social media. So we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter. I believe we're also on Pinterest. You can go ahead and engage with us there if you have some additional questions. If you'd like more personal touch, you can go ahead and send us an email at ttupdate@awana.org. A couple other ways that you can engage with us. You can contact our customer care team. Here, they would be happy to help you with any additional questions you may have. And then also, I would encourage you to take advantage of your local Awana missionary to engage with them with any additional questions you may have. So if you need an even more personal touch, where you just need to sit down with somebody face to face, walk through this material, your local Awana missionary is a great resource for you to be able to tap into. But we've added this next year a lot of different layers for you all as leaders to engage with us. I would just encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. Ask questions. Send us a question on Facebook. We would love for so much to engage with you, and just to make sure that you have everything that you need in order to have a successful launch or relaunch of the new TNT starting this fall.
Wow, that's really fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. And I sure do hope and pray that this information and the different opportunities that the children's ministry team has been working so hard to make available to all of our leaders out there is well utilized, and it's a good opportunity then to have those conversations. Well, I think we've answered all the questions that I've seen, and since we're running short on time, Chris, would you mind wrapping us up? Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I think I know that all of you are, for the most part, wrapping up your club year. If you haven't already done so, it's going to happen over the course of the next couple of weeks. This has been several months of work. Several months of commitment, of hours, of really giving of your time, your talent, your treasure to pour in and engage into the lives of kids. And so just from everyone here at headquarters, I just want to express a deep felt thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you for the hard work that you have done. Thank you for making yourself available to be used by God in this way to reach kids with the gospel. Again, there's no higher calling than that, and I'm so blessed to be able to just be in the same company as you. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for making time. Thank you for leading games. Thank you for stepping up and being a large group teacher. Thank you for engaging as a small group leader, building relationships with your kids. I get so excited just thinking about all the opportunities, all the seeds that were planted this past year. And I just cannot wait to see what God's going to do with every single one of those relationships, every single one of those kids. And I'm again, also excited to see how God is going to continue to work through every single one of you as you continue to engage in the good work of really just presenting the gospel to kids and leading them in lifelong discipleship. So thank you for what you do. Please engage with us, ask us questions, even send us pictures of your kids, of your club, new crazy things that you're doing. We would love to see what you're doing inside of children's ministry at Awana. And with that, I would just encourage everybody, have a fantastic weekend and hope to talk to you soon.